I was talking to an artist friend of mine the other day, and he shared some insights with me that help me to better understand how we can accept and integrate new thoughts that we're having. But first, let me talk a little bit about how our brains can struggle sometimes to accept new thoughts, particularly those that are maybe contradictory to our normal way of thinking. Our brains, while incredibly adaptable, do possess inherent mechanisms that can make it difficult for us to accept new and different thoughts. Our brains are full of neurons and neural pathways, those connectors, those thoughts. And as we think the same thing over and over, those neural pathways grow, they broaden out. It makes it easier to keep thinking the same things over and over again. And when we have new thoughts that are coming to us, particularly those that are veering away from those pathways, our brains can really sometimes struggle to integrate these new thoughts into our lives. And that's because these new ideas require our brains to build new neural pathways. Sticking to the old pathways, sticking to the old way of thinking is usually pretty much easier. It's because the more we have the same thoughts over and over, they become so integrated into who we are, it can be difficult to accept something that's a bit different that comes to mind. And our emotions certainly come into play as part of this process, because new thoughts can stimulate fear, a fear of the unknown. And this is something that many of us are uncomfortable with on some level or another. And that's because new information that appears contradictory or at odds with what we already think and believe is challenging, and it can stir up fear and uncertainty, which is quite uncomfortable. So our brains tend to revert to sticking with what we've learned, what we already know, and what we expect will be the outcome. And whether we like it or not, we all have cognitive biases, and these can steer us away from what is actually rational if we perceive that it is a safer or a more comfortable option just to keep believing what we believe, whether it's rational or not. Because we tend to receive and perceive information that confirms our cognitive biases. It's just more comfortable like that. And this means that we can sometimes subconsciously or even consciously ignore or downplay good ideas, fresh ideas, and new things that are different to our normal way of thinking. We like the status quo. Even if it's uncomfortable, it will be less uncomfortable than a perceived change and the fear that is associated with that change. And I think that the older we get, the more inclined we are to stick with the ideas that we have. We've been believing these things sometimes for a very long time. So to change the way we think or change the way we perceive these things, can be quite challenging and very, very difficult to adapt to new ideas and fresh ideas, even if they just make more sense. And this is often tied in with our emotional response and reaction to new ideas. We're comfortable doing the things that we do quite often, and we will subconsciously challenge these new things based on an emotional response of, well, why should we want to change? Life's okay. Sometimes we think these things even if life is not actually okay, because there's that fear, that uncertainty of what change might bring if we embrace these new ideas or new thoughts that come to us. So to accept new ideas, it really takes a conscious choice and some effort to really embrace and accept new things that enter our minds, to be able to make them part of our character, part of who we are. It certainly takes time, and if you're really inclined to it, it takes some discipline as well. And I found in my own experience, when I'm spending too much time on social media, this acts as a real deterrent to new and particularly new creative ideas that might come to me. Because social media tends to invoke shorter attention spans, and the algorithm drives us to consume information that it knows that we're already comfortable with. So let me share with you 3 steps that I've identified that I use to help me to accept new thoughts and to decide whether I want to integrate them into my way of thinking, including the insight that my artist friend Mike shared with me the other day. The first thing is to be aware of new thoughts. If somebody says something to us that's a little bit out of the usual, a little bit different than the way we think about it, just be aware that that's something that we have to process a little bit differently and hopefully be a bit more accepting of than an immediate emotional or subconscious reaction that is anti that idea. And the second thing is to actually stimulate situations where we are exposed to new ways of thinking, to new ideas, and to open up ourselves to much more creative processes. Because to be creative, you've got to be having these new ideas and generating new ideas. And then the third one is, which is what my friend Mike shared with me, is to learn to gaze, learn to really look at what we're looking at, or really to really think about these new concepts, really take time, if you like, to meditate on them. And he said, as an artist will look at a field, it might be just an empty brown field in the dry season in the north of Thailand. Brown is the predominant colour. It might be a green field, but if you look closely and you're really thinking about it, you're going to see a lot more than just brown. You're going to see yellows, you're going to see orange and red maybe. Sometimes you might catch some purple or some blue, but there's all kinds of other colours when you really stop to perceive what you're looking at. And this can be the same with our thinking. If we really spend time to gaze on our thoughts, to meditate on our thoughts, to accept what that person is telling me that might be different than the normal way I think, but it might be, oh, yeah, I actually like that. I actually believe that that fits with who I am and the way I like to do things. So be prepared to accept new thoughts, cultivate situations that you will actually stimulate new thoughts, and when you do have them, just be prepared to take some time and gaze at the landscape, of the thoughts that you're having, and decide which ones that you want to incorporate into who you are as a person. I hope you enjoy these videos and find them encouraging. I certainly enjoy sharing a few of my thoughts. If you'd like to see more of these videos, you can check out this one next. Thanks very much for watching.